Jeremy Birmingham from LettermanRoad.com joins us now. And Berm, we're coming off perhaps the most complete Ohio State victory we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, you watched a three-phases win for Ohio State, which even 13 wins a year ago, you didn't see a lot of those. And on Saturday at Indiana, you saw the offense dominate, the defense dominate, the special teams dominate. But even on the micro level, you break it down to the offensive line was dominating, the running game was dominating, the passing game was dominant. Everything worked. And, when you think about what Ryan Day and this program have been building for the last 8 months, like that sort of effort is really what they're talking about. And I think the most important thing for me watching it was that you saw a team that didn't rest on its laurels at any point in that game. They could have scored 70 points, sure, if they probably wanted to. There was no reason to keep Justin Fields and the rest of the offensive starters in the game in the fourth quarter. But, as you said, just thoroughly dominant from start to finish.
And granted, this is not a very good Iowa team, but I think the fact that you touched on the fact that it's the micro level stuff that Ohio State looks so good that's why people are so excited about this Buckeye team right now.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana, let's be clear, I'm not Iowa. We may have some fear building up there for Buckeye fans if you're talking about the Hawkeyes, but it's a program that obviously has more talent than anybody they're going to play week in, week out. So the opportunity to go out there and to leave no doubt is one of the most important things, and it's one of the differentiators, I think, if you look at the national landscape in the last few years between what people think of when they see Clemson and Alabama and even Georgia when they're not playing Alabama, is the ability to go out there and make sure you leave no doubt that you are the better program, that you're the better team, and that there is no complacency. And that's something that Ryan Day talked about a lot on Tuesday, was about complacency and about finding ways to improve on what we all look and see as was a very complete game.
Yeah, I think we probably heard Ryan Day say the words clean up more than he said the word Miami, as Ohio State very much focused on the fact that, yeah, we played great against Indiana, but there's a lot that they want to do to get better, and they're focusing on those small things in order to get the big goals for this program.
Yeah, I mean, it's little penalties, the little things that can be cleaned up, giving up a trick play at the end of the half. I thought that one of the things that was surprising about Saturday was that after Indiana did score that touchdown at the end of the first half, Ohio State had like a minute 45 to play and didn't try to run the 2-minute offense, which is something that you figured they're going to have to work on at some point. They haven't done that yet this year. And, I think that there's always these little areas of the game where you can continue to improve. And it doesn't look on the outside looking in like major things that you want to fix. But obviously they're seeing enough on tape. And even Robert Landers during the press conference today said that, Ohio State's giving up 1.8 yards a carry on the ground, but that's not enough, and they need to get better. So it's certainly, if you're an Ohio State fan, it's encouraging to hear them so focused and seemingly with the eyes on the big prize, which is not just about beating Miami of Ohio.
And certainly one guy who has his eyes on the big prize and wasn't afraid to speak of it today was Damon Arnett, who flat out said, our goal is to win a natty. I spoke it into existence. He wasn't shying away from that talk.
No, I think it's great to see a guy like Damon Arnett, who for the last few years has sort of been a favorite whipping boy of fans around the country, who think that he maybe wasn't living up to his expectations. But this is the third cornerbacks coach he's had in 3 years. He's had some injury issues, and for him to go out and to play opposite Jeff Okudah, who's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year if he goes out early like everyone thinks, to see Arnett step up as a leader on the field and stepping up on it, off of it, and saying, hey, we have expectations here at Ohio State that are very, very high, and there is no reason to think that Ohio State shouldn't be in the national conversation discussion. And when he decided to come back to school, that's one of the reasons. You want to play with this group of guys because the opportunity to win a national championship, a Big Ten championship, is right here in front of him.
Speaking of leadership, there's certainly been a lot of discussion about Justin Fields, his leadership. And, it's been a while since Ohio State's had a very public, fiery leader at quarterback position. We certainly know J.T. Barrett was fiery in private, but he was always a very calm demeanor in public, certainly very calm demeanor in meeting with the media. Dwayne Haskins was the same way, and Justin Fields is now the same way.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that those two sides of those guys is very different, because Dwayne Haskins was uber confident, okay? He was not a guy who would stand up and scream and shout, but he never left any doubt about how confident he was about his abilities, about what the offense could do. J.T. Barrett is one of the foremost leaders to ever walk through these doors here at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. So I think if you can find a guy that fits that mold, and Mike Yurcich talked about it on Tuesday, it's about having a leader that has done it, has been through it. And so for a lot of guys, especially because we only saw Dwayne Haskins for a year, we've only seen Justin Fields now for 3 weeks, they have to prove that they can do it and on Saturdays and then have that translate to how they're leading in the weight room, in the locker room, in the classroom. So all the rah-rah talk, is not who Justin Fields is, but it's also at this point probably too early to expect that from him because he has not had the opportunity to really put that on tape for everyone to see.
Saturday, Miami of Ohio comes into the shoe. They've never beaten Ohio State. No one's expecting them to beat Ohio State on Saturday. So why should the Buckeyes even bother to show up?
Because it's another game to get better, and it's the Buckeyes are looking at what happens next week. I think you never want to overlook an opponent. I think it is safe to kind of prepare for Nebraska at the same time. And Nebraska is going to be setting up that game as sort of their Super Bowl for this season, and for Scott Frost and his early part of his career at Nebraska. That is setting up very similar to Jeff Brom at Purdue for a year ago, and I think that the reason you show up is because there's a lot to work on before that game, because you have 2 weeks to prepare for the real start of the Big Ten, and when you don't have the break like you do after Indiana. So ultimately it's about getting better. It's about finding ways to improve what's obviously working already, but there are always things you can do better.
Famously, earlier this week, Miami head coach Chuck Martin said, speaking of the talent gap between the two programs, it's like we're playing a game at recess and Ohio State has the first 85 picks. Is that the type of message you want to send to your team if you're a Red Hawk?
Well, I think at this point you need to embrace the underdog, right? I mean, you certainly know that nobody expects you to win this game. You are a program in the MAC, and you're not one of the MAC's best programs. You have some talented players, but there's not a player on that roster Ohio State would have offered a scholarship to. So, I think you just embrace the underdog mentality and say, hey, it's David versus Goliath, and if you want to have any chance to pull off one of the most stunning upsets in college football history, then you just need to go at it and say, play dead if you want to. I mean, Lou Holtz was famous for that. Don't ever underestimate your opponent. In fact, talk them up. And I don't think that there's any chance for complacency from Ohio State on Saturday.
Ohio State's gotten very tight-lipped about injuries, so we don't know what to expect if Jonathan Cooper's going to be back and when he's going to be back. But we did notice Damon Arnett had a cast on his right wrist today. I'd be surprised if Arnett plays a full game against Miami for several reasons, but certainly that injury is something to keep an eye on with Damon Arnett.
Well, that's the thing. Damon's had that for 3 weeks on and off, so it's interesting to see that he's had a couple times in the first few weeks of the year where he had potential interceptions that got dropped, and he said it was because of the cast, and didn't stop him from returning 197 yards on Saturday at Indiana. But when you look at the defensive line, the injuries to Jonathan Cooper, Tyreek Smith only played a half at Indiana. You want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your guys, but you also want to make sure that you're not putting your future in harm's way. So could Jonathan Cooper have played against Indiana? Probably, from what I understand, and I would expect a similar situation this weekend. Will he play this weekend? I don't know. I mean, that's up for Ryan Day and the Buckeye football program to decide, and the doctors. But that's part of the reason why they're keeping these injuries so tight-lipped, is they don't necessarily want to give away anything. And if you're Zach Harrison and Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, you're going out and practicing like those guys aren't going to play. So, and I think that you're getting the best out of your guys if that's the case.
This is Teacher Appreciation Week. We heard several of the Buckeyes speak about teachers that made a difference in their lives. I'm going to shout out Lanny Katzman, journalism teacher at Roy C. Start. What about you?
Ooh, my favorite teacher at Start was my French teacher was Miss O'Brien. She was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And Mr. Stein, who was our freshman year Russian history teacher, I thought he was great too. So, but for me, I mean, I go all the way back to elementary school and Mike Mayo at Holy Cross Elementary when it was still a school over there. So we certainly had some great teachers at Start High School.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week here on College Football Weekly. I want to thank Jeremy Birmingham from LettermanRow.com.